Great Lakes Prepping here. Not since the decades-long injustice of hot dogs being sold in packages of 10 while hot dog buns are sold in packages of 8 have I had a bigger culinary pet peeve than the size of commercially available breakfast sausage patties. If you've ever had the grand idea to make your own McMuffin-style breakfast sandwich at home, you've undoubtedly encountered this as well. And if you're not sure what I mean, I'm talking about this. If you buy pre-made breakfast sausage patties from the grocery store, chances are they're gonna look just about like that. And if you've ever bought English muffins, you know that they look just about like that. Well, you don't need a doctorate in geometry to know that there's a serious problem with the diameters of these two ingredients. Now, despite these mismatched sizes and the inevitable frustration of trying to enjoy such a ridiculous breakfast sandwich, we've probably all done it anyway. I know I've had more than a few breakfast sandwiches that resembled this right here. But I've had just about enough of that, and as I often say, if you want to do something right, or at least better, you have to do it yourself. And until Jimmy Dean and Bob Evans decides to get with the program and start making a realistic sized breakfast sausage patty, that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. So in this video, we're making breakfast sausage patties from scratch. We're going to grind up some pork, season it, form them into patties, fry them up, and make ourselves some beautiful homemade McMuffin style breakfast sandwiches. So let's get into it. Now, real quick, before we start grinding up that pork, I think that it's only fair to do a scientific analysis. So here we've got an ordinary, run-of-the-mill, standard McDonald's Egg McMuffin. Never looks as good as it does in the picture, but it serves its purpose. Now that's the kind of sausage patty that fills an English muffin edge to edge. Of course, the fast food companies are going to make their meat pretty thin, and we might not go quite as thin as that. But the point is, every bite includes some sausage. And if we wanted to compare that to what we can make at home ourselves with the store-bought sausage patty, that's what we have. Now, I don't exactly feel like getting out the protractors and slide rules and all that, but this thing looks to be just barely more than half the size of the McDonald's patty. And that's just not going to work for me anymore. So we're going to make a few pounds of sausage, patty it all up, and freeze most of it so I can go ahead and enjoy it whenever I want, and I can stop buying these ridiculous things. I'll get started by cutting up my pork into narrow chunks that will fit into the meat grinder. I'm using about half of a pork shoulder, also called a pork butt. I had previously cut up a pork shoulder into smaller chunks so I could fit the pieces into vacuum sealed bags and freeze. This meat had been thawing in the fridge since yesterday. It's still just slightly frozen, and that actually works perfectly for cutting up and grinding. Next, it's all going through the grinder. I'm using a medium fine grinding plate. I'll mention that for sausage links, I generally double grind the meat, but for these patties, I'm just going to grind them once. For something like this, it's really just a personal preference. After grinding, we'll give everything a quick weigh in so I can calculate how much seasoning to use. My seasoning recipe is written out for 1 pound of ground pork, and since I've got just about 3.5 pounds here, I have to multiply my recipe by 3.5. And of course, I'll include my seasoning recipe in the video description below. What we're using for the seasonings is a pretty standard Jimmy Dean style breakfast sausage blend. We've got kosher salt, dry parsley, rubbed sage, black pepper, dry thyme, red pepper flakes, and coriander. And by the way, if I wanted to turn this into maple sausage, I'd just add about 2 or 3 tablespoons of real maple syrup per pound of meat. I'll give everything a thorough mix with my fingers and then cover with plastic wrap. Now this is going to sit in the fridge for at least 8 hours. I really want the flavor from those spices to blend with that meat,
so letting it sit in the fridge for several hours is an important step. Now it's out of the fridge and it's time to make our sausage patties. The way I like to do this is to spray the counter down with some cooking spray, cover my meat with a layer of plastic wrap, and roll it out until it's about as thin as I want my patties to be. And while I'm notoriously bad at rolling out anything into a nice even shape, be it dough, meat, or anything else, I'm going to make it work. I'll use my stainless steel cookie cutter that's exactly the size of an English muffin and just start cutting out my patties. By the way, you can make your patties in any number of ways. Just eyeball it and form them with your hands. Use a hamburger mold. I personally find this way to work very well for me. After cutting out all the patties, I'll give each one a finishing touch by pressing them down just a little bit thinner and cleaning up those edges with my hands. Then each one goes on a square of parchment paper so they don't stick together. You can buy little squares or circles of paper for this very purpose, but I just cut up a couple sheets of regular parchment paper. While most of these will be headed for the freezer for later use, we're absolutely cooking one up right now. Is there anything better than the sizzle of breakfast meat in a hot cast iron skillet? Well, maybe the smell of fresh sausage cooking. And since this is all being done in the name of a better breakfast sandwich, of course we have to fry up an egg. Using that same stainless steel cookie cutter, after washing it of course, I'm going to fry up a perfectly round, thick fried egg just like you'd get from McDonald's. And just to make it as authentic as possible, I'll break the yolk a little bit so it cooks through. Add a pinch of salt, a pinch of pepper, and that's it. Now to assemble our homemade egg McMuffin. Of course we start with a toasted, buttered English muffin, then the American cheese, our beautiful sausage patty, and that almost perfectly round fried egg. I've got nothing against a McDonald's Egg McMuffin, and I sure have enjoyed more than a couple in my day, but I personally happen to think that they pale in comparison to my homemade rendition. And real quick, all the rest of these patties will end up getting vacuum sealed for freezer storage, but first I'm just going to put them in this baking dish and cover with some plastic wrap and just set the whole thing in the freezer for a couple of hours. This lets the patties harden up a bit so they don't get all squished and mangled when I vacuum seal them.
Now that's what I call a satisfying breakfast sandwich. No wasting my time nibbling around the edges of that English muffin trying to find a little bit of shred of sausage patty. This thing is wall-to-wall sausage, and as you can see, it's definitely a lot thicker than that McDonald's patty. If I'm eating a sausage, egg, and cheese, I want to taste that sausage. So I guess a pretty straightforward video. You just watched me make some breakfast with a bunch of extra steps. But you can see it's really rather simple to make your own ground sausage from scratch. As long as you have a means to grind it, either a grinder like mine, or a cheap manual grinder, or even a KitchenAid attachment. Throw in a few spices, form it into the shape of a patty, and you're in business. So that's it for now. Be sure to like and subscribe and stay up to date with all our latest stuff, including future cooking videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time here in the Great Lakes Kitchen.